You're listening to Contesting Wrestling Premium, and eventually we'll come up with a cool name for our movie club, but we haven't yet.
If you have any ideas,
yes, send them to us. We've been talking about doing this for a while, where we start digging through the world of movies that are connected to wrestling in some way or another, starring wrestlers. We're eventually going to delve into the huge and terrifying world of WWE studios, which include, I'm personally excited to learn that apparently the WWE at one point purchased the rights to the Surf's Up films of animated surfing penguins, and then recast a bunch of the characters and made a movie 11 years after made Surf's Up 2 11 years after Surf's Up 1, starring Vince McMahon and like John Cena and some other people. So like, there's some of these movies I'm very excited about.
Yeah, I mean, I think
I'm not.
Well, a big part about it is just the question of the rationale behind making them, right? Like,
yes,
that's what's really interesting, and no more so than in the movie that we watched for this particular episode, 1988's Hell Comes to Frogtown, starring Rowdy Roddy Piper.
I have regret.
This movie is it is definitely a B movie. If you want to watch this movie, don't go in thinking this is going to be a great movie, because it's not.
I thought about doing like some research on the history of this movie and how it came to be and who was involved. And then after watching it, I was like, I don't want to spend any more time thinking about this than I have to. I'm just going to treat this in a vacuum.
I tried and I couldn't find much. The guy, Donald G. Jackson, is the guy who created the concept, and he was the co-writer and director of the film. But yeah, I couldn't find much about what his motivations might be. It seems like, this is
probably for the best.
This is a great example of just male sexuality, white male American sexuality contorted in various ways and then expressed through the lens of, I don't know, some nightmarish fantasy.
This movie should have, with this plot, the story of this should have been a porn.
Well, so actually,
yes,
right?
yeah.
Like
So,
that is really what it was like. They took the plot of a decent pornographic film, and then we're like, let's instead just try to make a movie out of it.
One of those cool high budget pornos, and then turned it into a low budget science fiction film.
So when I was watching it, actually, our friend Charlie was like, "Oh, this really strikes me as like a porn parody of Mad Max or something like that." And
yeah, kind of.
And I think it was, apparently one of the producers said something to this effect. It was supposed to be a satire in a way. It was supposed to be a parody of a post-apocalyptic film, but it ended up having the quality and level of consciousness of a porn parody.
Yeah.
I felt like it was a satire of it wasn't a satire, but the fact that you sat down and watched this movie, it's like it was more of a mockery. It was like a movie that mocked you, but you watched it, and then at the end it was like, yeah, you just fucking watched this. What are you doing with yourself that this series of events happened? I knew of this only because I'm not a huge bad movie person. Sometimes I really like bad movies. Sometimes I find them overrated, even as bad movies, where I'm like, that was just a waste of time. It wasn't like very fun or joyful.
I like watching Mystery Science Theater 3000 as much as the next guy, but what a lot of people who are fans of that kind of thing don't really like to admit is that once you take the riff tracks off, the movies are actually bad. Like, you don't enjoy watching them for hours.
For every movie like The Room or Troll 2 or like something else that is genuinely enjoyable to watch because it is just a staggering act of hubris and committed to, all that stuff. Like, for the most part, it's just not fun to watch. Yeah, like, they're just like not fun to watch. I remember I tried to watch Manos: The Hands of Fate once. And this movie is better than Man Knows the Hands of Fate. But, like, I tried to watch it. Like, you can make it, like, a couple minutes into that before you're just like, oh, anything I do with my time would be better. If I decided to just jerk off and take a nap, that would be a more enriching experience for my life than watching this movie.
This reminds me more of 1953's Robot Monster, which is probably my favorite bad movie of all time, where despite it's it's terrible the whole time, it's still kind of enjoyable to watch, though, because of how fucking ridiculous it is.
I would say this is like 75% enjoyable, ridiculous, 25% wildly uncomfortable.
Well, I did not. So apologies right off the bat. I just thought this was a like stupid post-apocalyptic movie. I did not understand how large of a role non-consensual or sex of like dubious consent levels were part of the plot. I had no idea about that until I started watching this, and then I was like, oh no, I picked a movie about somebody who commits a lot of sexual assault, who then gets hired by the U.S. government in the hopes of committing more, at least somewhat assaulty sex.
Yeah, that basically sums it up. The conceit of the movie is that we are in post-nuclear. Where were they? Like, did they say where they were?
They did not. They said.
All right. Yeah, they're right outside of Megaton after the war.
They just want to point out they imply that all nuclear bombs were used.
Yes.
Right, because over the course of the movie, we learned that there are no nuclear bombs left.
Right.
So we used all the nuclear bombs, which is a lot.
That's a lot, yes.
And it's been, and I had to rewind to make sure, but as far as I can tell, it has been 10 years.
And in those 10 years,
all nuclear bombs were used.
And in those 10 years, the radiation from those nuclear bombs altered the genome of frogs and I think other amphibian species.
I couldn't tell if it altered the frogs or made the people into frogs.
Laura and I were trying to figure that out. Were they people and they mutated into frogs? I thought they were mutants.
Right.
Something
mutant. Had mutated.
Well, they were definitely mutants. Just what kind of mutants is not very clear.
It seems from the one frog woman who I made sure to get her name because, sorry.
I appreciate your academic discipline in this context.
Yeah, I appreciate that you bothered, Ben.
Arabella is the name of the frog woman. She seems to be only frog from like the neck up.
I think most of the frog people were
maybe her torso.
Mostly humanoid. They just had those big frog head costume pieces.
That were bad.
It would.
Well, and then the genitalia of one of them.
Right.
We'll get to that.
Yes.
I will.
Unorthodox.
It was not that science plays a huge role in this movie, but it would make more sense for them to be frogs that mutated into sentient people. Only because
that's what I was hoping.
Because human. Because I sort of felt like they were humans who had turned into frogs. That was my takeaway from the term mutants, and that is usually what post-apocalyptic mutants are.
See, that's what I thought.
But turning into frog, that's a very specific mutation. Like being like, okay, like radiation turned everybody specifically into frogs. I don't know. It doesn't check out, guys.
Well, and you're right. The 10-year gap doesn't check out either. Like all of this happened in 10 years.
Maybe
Piper's
it was
character
immediate.
is like, this guy took care of me when I was a kid. It's like, well, no, the war was 10 years ago. What happened when you were a kid? You're not that young, dude.
Maybe it was immediate. Maybe the bomb went off and all of a sudden the frogs or people were like, blah, mutate.
This came out the same year as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I think.
You mean the TV show, or the comic was earlier, right?
The comic might have been slightly earlier. I think, I guess the TV show was this year. But it was, they were mutants, and they were, turtles. That's why my first thought was that they were frogs that became people-like, because that's what happened to the Ninja Turtles.
That makes sense.
That does make sense, yes.
Into that
I don't know if anybody watched it. We could actually watch it right now using the share screen feature. there is a sequel to this movie called Return to Frogtown that
God
they made.
damn it.
And in the trailer, we're not going to watch it. I'm not going to make us watch it.
Wait, it's not Welcome to Dogtown, starring Roddy Piper's
dogs.
family and neighbors.
No.
Hold on.
It
Wait,
is
hold
not.
on. I'm gonna risk a lawsuit right now, and I'm going to find the trailer. I'm gonna find the trailer for this, and it's like a minute and a half.
Ugh.
All right.
It also
people.
stars somebody who I don't recognize who also looks like a wrestler. Let me. Oh, here we go. No. I just need to.
Do we want it to
There
come
we
through?
go. There we go. All right. Here we go.
They're greener. The time has come for the creatures of Frogtown to rise up. They're meaner. But these mutants are no teenagers. Ribbit. Bring me the strongest Texas Rocket Rangers.
Major Jones to base. Come in, Fuzzy.
There he is.
Looks like something's moving down on the road. Fuzzy, I'm hit.
Sam, we got a problem. Jones reported being shot down.
Jones is my partner. I gotta go look for him.
I was kind of hoping you'd volunteer. Here's your new partner, Dr. Spangle.
What is our preordained mission in life? To turn the world green.
What was that?
Wait here, I'm gonna go check it out.
Captured by the Hellraisers of Frogtown, bent on the destruction of humanity.
What took evolution thousands of years, I have accomplished in only days.
You must speed up the transformation process. Execute them all at sunrise. The pride of the Texas Rocket Rangers must escape the clutches of the evil Tsar Frogmeister to liberate Frogtown from his army of mutant reptiles.
Don't move. I wanted a world where everyone was free.
The riveting saga continues. I'll be back.
This looks even worse somehow.
So that exists in the world.
That
Wow.
looks like it might be better, actually. Than
Do
the
you?
first
So
one.
does that guy look familiar to you at all?
No.
No.
There was one guy who looked like Lou Ferrigno, but it probably wasn't Lou Ferrigno.
No, this costs. Lou Ferrigno costs too much for this type of shit.
Yeah.
Have we described the actual basic idea of this movie? No,
Not entirely,
Okay,
actually.
So let's So just
All right, so
you.
Roddy Piper is apparently one of the only fertile men left on the planet. And so he's captured by this troop of, like, police nurses.
The med tech. It seems to be a new branch of the government that hunts the fertile.
The provisional government.
The provisional
as they
government.
refer to it several times. The provisional
Right,
government.
because the old government's
they-
dead.
Yeah, and they give him this, like, girdle, like, it looks kind of like an electronic chastity belt, but it's for the purpose of their controlling his use of his junk, because there's a flap,
There's a flap.
as they point out, which I suppose his penis can come out of. And so the idea is that there are also very few fertile women around, and so Piper's character Sam Hell is going to impregnate them and therefore somehow replenish the human race or contribute to it.
Not only
And in order to
No, just to say, not only does it have the plot of a porn, it specifically has the plot of a porn version of Children of Men. Like, it's kind of, if you think about it, it's sort of the same structure.
they have to rescue these women from the frog people, it turns out.
In Frogtown.
In Frogtown.
Yeah.
And the other thing about this, I think the best thing to call this thing on covering Piper's loins is like a shock codpiece.
Sure, it's like a chastity belt that shocks you and also has C4 in it.
Yeah, it's like a shock collar for a dog that, like, if they go too far away from the house, it will give them an electric shock. But if they stay away for too long, it will then explode.
Really, the saddest and most pessimistic thing about this movie is that they make it explicitly clear the goal of MedTech is to rebuild society so they can continue the war with Russia.
Yeah, because the war never ended. Not really.
They're like
Russia.
the goal is to build new nuclear weapons and just like continue to do all of this. And I'm like, wow, you feel like people would learn their like I can't. It's hard to even root for the guy because it's just sort of like, oh, like I'm gonna rebuild society so we can continue to nuke each other. It's a real downer.
Gotta nuke something.
Right.
So for some reason, they have to bring this guy like with them to Frogtown to rescue all these women. Of course, being a stupid action movie, he's the one that ends up doing most of the rescuing.
Couldn't they just have harvested his semen?
They did. They made it clear that the backup plan, they're going to try to get the women out so we can impregnate them safely. But the backup plan, in case that plan does not work, is for him to just go and impregnate them in Frogtown and then get him out, which...
to the next hotspot.
Yes, yeah. So the backup plan is to leave them there to have their human children in Frogtown.
Which probably wouldn't go
The
very
babies
well.
would probably all die from
Doesn't seem
malnutrition.
like it would.
Let's be real here.
Or they'd get eaten.
Yes, by frog people. Or people frogs. One or the other.
It's the kind of thing that had one person read the script before they started filming, they would have been like, hey, wait, we don't need this part. Nobody needs to say this part.
It's hurting me. It's hurting me thinking about it. It really is.
The part that was really unnecessary was the non-consensual sex.
Or weird, At first, it very much seemed like Piper's co-star is I didn't get the name of the actress, but the character's name is Spangle, and there's this very uncomfortable scene where they find a runaway woman, someone who's escaped from Frogtown.
Yeah, they're heading to Frogtown, and they find a woman who escaped from Frogtown.
Yeah. And at first, they have her tied up, and they have Piper It's clear that they want Piper to impregnate her. And at first,
Spangler is the head scientist from MedTech, and then they also have an armed guard woman.
The one with the nice titties.
And she looks kind of like. I mean, they're both super hot.
Right, but we see the other one's boobs.
Right, yes.
The only boobs in the movie,
looks like,
despite the fact that the whole thing is about sex.
Spangle looks kind of like Michelle McCool.
She does,
bit, I thought. There's that really weird scene where like Spangle tries to get him aroused, and then when he actually tries to have sex with her, she shocks him.
That scene. Let's just because she's like, I'm skilled in all of these in a variety of seduction techniques, and then she proceeds to engage in. If you've ever seen Star Trek V: The Final Frontier, the fan dance that Uhura performs, which is already one of the dumbest scenes anybody's ever put into a movie. This is a far less erotic.
Yeah.
And
none of this was arousing in the
uncomfortable.
slightest.
This is the most uncomfortable. And she's seducing him from a distance by moving uncomfortably and not touching him. And she
does that twice, actually.
Now, there is one generous interpretation by which you could say this movie is sort of going against some sexist stereotypes of the 80s, and that's, at this time, I felt like it was a real staple of all media that all male characters were ready for sex no matter what at the drop of a hat. Enthusiastic.
Yeah.
And this is one of the few movies where the guy's like, there's some slight pushback to the idea that he has to fuck his way through society.
So I was wondering in that scene where they capture the woman and she's tied up, at first when he's like, well, I don't know, she hasn't never brushed her teeth before, something like that, or like, I need better ambiance for something like this. At first I was interpreting it as him being reluctant to have sex with her non-consensually, but not being able to express that for exactly the reasons you were alluding to, Evan, that it's like it was it was an unmacho thing to like not want to do that. And so he couldn't express that directly, but he was trying to get around it. But then once he does agree to have sex with her, all of a sudden she seems like totally willing. But we never get like a clear sense of her agency or anything like that until after.
She's barely a character until the next morning.
I think the assumption. I think the assumption is we're supposed to assume that Piper is just such a fire hose of sexual energy that no human woman or mutant woman can resist his charm. So it's just by choosing to have sex with her, she automatically consents because he's just that great. That is what we are led to believe.
Well, they keep insinuating the whole time that not only, like, is he fertile, but, like, all these unfertile or, like, women are trying to fuck him, too, because the legend of his penis is so widespread that apparently he's just the best lay ever.
And, I mean, I will say, I've now learned enough about Rowdy Roddy Piper where I, like, can't look at him without, like, thinking about the blackface or all sorts of stuff. But, like, he's not a bad-looking guy, certainly. And I don't know. I might cut this part because it also sounds weird after all of the... There's just so much non-consensual sex in this movie. It's really uncomfortable, man.
All of the sex that they even like show as kind of consensual is still presented as like this violent act. Everyone that
and the attitude of the woman the next morning, like, I escaped, unlike those passives who believe the meek will inherit the earth.
So they bring this passives thing up like a couple times.
And it's really not very relevant.
Well, it's the big clincher at the end of the movie, though, right? The passive has to hand him his weapon.
But it's a do it. How does you pronounce that thing? Machina, blah.
Deus Ex Machina?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Well,
kind of.
I mean, it's not quite a Deus Ex Machina because they did kind of build it up earlier. If it had come out of nowhere...
they didn't build it up a lot. Also, I had no idea ever how to pronounce that, so thank you. Thank you, Ben. Guys, he's tapping his PhD again. He's licking it. He's whoa, Ben, why are you pouring gravy on it?
My.
Ben is drinking gravy off of his PhD, everybody.
It's laminated.
So I couldn't get my head around, and like I understand that this is like a shitty movie and picking it apart is dumb, but something that I found that I was trying to understand with the passives is that here's the world building that happens in this movie. Here are the things we know about the world in this movie. MedTech exists. Frogtown exists, and mutants exist, and there's like a slave trade there. There are people wandering the wasteland, like Sam Hell. There is one subgroup of people called passives that believe in not doing anything. Apparently, literally not even doing anything to save their own lives. That's it.
Except learning how to dance erotically for their captors.
Yes. That's it. So that's all we have. That's the picture we have of like human cult, which once again, if you're not like you don't need to know everything about the world outside, but just the fact that they introduce like, there's a tribe of people that believes in not doing anything. And we're not going to get into anyone else's beliefs or any other tribe or any it was very strange.
The whole time I was watching this movie, especially once they get to Frogtown and you see all the, like, interesting enough looking B-movie frog suits, is that I wish this was a trauma film.
Yeah.
If this was a trauma film, it would be a lot more interesting. They'd all just be fake vomiting on each other the whole time. Like the sex scenes would be more interesting.
I had that exact thought. I had that exact thought when we didn't see the three-headed snake.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
The three snakes.
If this was
of the three snakes.
I'm not familiar with trauma, but if this was trauma, we'd have seen the three snakes and they'd all be puking, right? Or spewing
Something like
green.
that, yes.
Yes, exactly.
If this had been a Troma movie, it would have been aware that it was not a good movie. Which that was the thing, is that
Yeah,
this movie
right.
did still seem to think that it was a movie, that it was presenting you with a coherent story.
There was one character, and I think one actor, who knew how stupid and bad the movie was, and that was whoever did the voice for the frog person named Bull.
Yes, the closest thing to a famous part of this movie is the clip of him going, "Shut your hole!"
Yeah, so the over-the-top ridiculousness of his voice could not have been unself-conscious, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Like,
there's also like
Well,
a part later where he says, or like the body language when he's like saying stuff like he's going to give her a night she'll never forget.
Right.
Yeah, sorry.
I thought the old prospector guy did pretty well. At least that was my impression of him. I can't remember the character's name because I'm so bad at that because they do such a bad job of establishing these things. Can any of you remember?
No.
The prospector guy, I thought of his name
oh,
was
Looney Tunes.
Looney Tunes, right.
Right.
That
They
was
talk
Rory
about-
Calhoun.
His name is
Right,
Looney
Rory Calhoun,
Tunes.
Looney Tunes.
His name is Looney Tunes because he's so crazy that he's the sanest guy you'll ever know. That was how he introduced himself.
That is a good way to describe Bugs Bunny.
It's-
I mean, it is.
All right, we have to talk about the scene where Sam Hell gets the thing removed from him.
With
with the chainsaw.
girdle, as you put it, the bomb on his dick.
No, that's what it is. The bomb on his dick.
So we haven't fully explained this. Spangle was wearing 2 earrings, and one of them, if she tapped on it, would activate his genital prison to cause him tremendous pain. The same thing would happen if he was just far away from it. He had to stay in proximity. We did talk about that.
And if he removed her earrings, he would also explode.
Yeah. And the idea is if he were to take it off, there's a small C4 charge in it that would blow up, so he can't get rid of it. Her other earring she can tap and make the pain go away. So he was fully at her mercy because she had like this pain machine on her to control him, so he can't get away. And
he's not sure whether she's bluffing about the explosion, though.
Yeah, how is he going to check, you know?
And I think Bull, the frog guy, when he's going to cut it off with a chainsaw, makes a good point that he's so valuable to them. It's unlikely that they would
Right,
blow
it's
him
the
up.
most sensical thing anyone says in the whole movie. It's like, why would they put an explosive on your dick when you're one of the only fertile men alive?
so I think my single favorite thing in the movie was the extended chainsaw scene. Because it's like he pulls out a friggin' chainsaw and it's like, oh, he's just got a chainsaw. And then he goes to town. You don't see him like touching the chainsaw to the genital prison, but you see a comical amount of sparks come out like he's welding a car, like for a long time. And then Piper's there, so you see his face and arms, and he's just screaming, and Bull's chainsawing, and it's ridiculous.
And I love when the chainsaw gives out, and he's like, I gotta
chainsaw.
go. And Piper's like, where are you going? He's like, to get more gas.
Right? He needs more gas for the chainsaw. So he eventually does chainsaw the damn thing off of him, and it doesn't blow up. And Sam
immediately,
right? And Sam Hell says, they tricked me," and then it blows up right in Bull's face.
And thus ends the only character I care about at all in this film.
Now, this part also made sense to me because, in designing this girdle, they wouldn't have expected him to, try to remove it with a chainsaw, right? So the idea that it wouldn't blow up immediately upon being removed in that particular way kind of made sense.
Nothing about this movie makes sense, Ben. Shut up.
Okay.
So
Shut up. Quit tapping your PhD.
I was trying.
Well, if
He's
we
a
want to
guys.
focus,
He's got his balls out now, and he's just teabagging his own PhD.
I will say, if you want to explain something to me, Dr. Balls out. So they're frogs, right? They're frogs. But they're eating...
Yeah.
Their main food is a paste that consists of other reptiles that have been mushed up. So frogs...
The goulash.
Yes.
as it were.
Which frogs, to my knowledge, do not eat other reptiles. I could be wrong about that. If they do, that's metal. And I would like to watch that happen on a YouTube video.
I'm sure it's on YouTube.
Also,
if it
they
happens.
have a currency.
Look, evolution is tricky. It's messy. And
Evolution is a mystery.
it's a mystery full of change that no one
There you go.
sees.
But
It'll change the course of history.
they have a currency that's based on that they call lilies.
They don't explain it. Is it literal
See, yeah.
lilies?
Is
Nobody
it lily
explains
pads?
it, and everyone unanimously understands it, even the humans.
No, I was going to say, and apparently they're really valuable because it's like 5 lilies, and people are like, please, 10.
Oh yeah, you can purchase a human for a seemingly small number of lilies for like under 50 lilies. It seems like
Not the amount of currency you'd expect for like a thing that has to be smuggled in through the wasteland.
so. Maybe it's like a cultural memory as frogs of the time in the before times 10 years ago. When from 10 years ago to millions of years before 10 years ago, the whole lifespan in which they were frogs, there's a memory of how important lily pads were to them, and then now that they're human scumbags, that's the thing, is that they not only mutated, but they immediately mutated into being like scumbags and crime lords and goons. Like, we don't meet any
Right.
good. Well, Toady has like 6 goons, by the way. For the guy who's like the king of the wasteland, he has a total
He's the
of
guy.
6.
He's the guy with the 3 snakes.
Yes. Which, all right. So let's talk. So there's the plan where
You have aroused the 3 snakes.
Wieners!
Spangle and the armed guard are bring him to Frogtown. They come up with a plan where Hell is pretending that he's trying to sell Spangle as a slave, and then
And absolutely delights in manhandling her.
yeah.
Like that was a really.
He
sick
was like,
fucking
how do
scene
you
there.
like it, huh? Yeah.
And they Toady, the boss, winds up purchasing her. Also, should point out all of the frogs. So some of them are it looks like just people in thick makeup, like the one frog woman that we meet.
Yeah,
Seems
she
like
doesn't
she's
look
kinda wearing
as
a mask.
mutated.
Yeah. All of the other frogs are clearly, it's got to be like one guy. There's like one person with a giant like head prosthesis thing on, and then probably somebody else controlling the eyes, or like they're like sort of puppet costume hybrids.
And an eye patch in one
Yes.
case with both.
They are probably really delicate, because anytime there's a fight with them, the way that they're cut is that it really looks like Piper is just very gently pressing his fist into them, and they're just trying to cut it in a way where it makes it look like he's punching. Because they're probably just like, this shit is expensive. We spent the entire budget on these fucking frog things.
There's a lot of scenes where the frog people are standing there moving nothing but their mouths, and maybe one arm. Because they couldn't move it that much.
So Toady, the boss, agrees to purchase Spangle, and then he summons her to his chamber where he's got his goons are around, and he's like, you have to perform the dance of the 3 snakes. And I didn't know, she starts to dance, and I was just like, is this does everybody in the wasteland, do we all know this? Do we all know, is this a common thing? It was just, if I said like, I do the Macarena, you would all know what that meant. Is the 3 snakes the Macarena?
No, it felt like she didn't know what it was, but like her body just kind of like gave itself over to it, like something.
It was something
There
with
was
what
some
those
kind
other
of-
women did.
Right, yeah, they gave her some kind of mystical energy that like unlocked the dance.
Oh yeah, there's a
within
whole
her.
scene where they're like dancing around her, doing something that,
Waving scarves.
and it felt like they were trying to make it erotic, but also like this movie is.
They
this
were
movie can't-
definitely trying to make it erotic. Let's be real here.
They were, but like this movie, like it can't decide how horny it is. That's the thing. Like this, it gets uncomfortably horny, and then it pulls back and is sort of PG
It
in
should
a
have been
way.
porn.
Yeah, exactly. It would have been less creepy, honestly, if it was like a Cinemax softcore porn, because it's the juxtaposition of like it sometimes being a strange sort of PG, like almost and then like something that's like really dark and like not just horny but extremely misogynistic. Like it's a disturbing mix. It's a real disturbing mix.
Anyway, they end up rescuing all these women and piling them out into their, giant van or whatever it is with the machine gun on top of it, and they start trying to get away.
And so she's performing the dance of the three snakes, or she's dancing, and it's getting real intense, and Toady finally says, "You have aroused the three snakes," and raises his clothes.
Yeah, and we know what the three snakes
He
are.
has three boners.
You see several lumps appearing in his pants moving around. But, they don't actually show you the three snakes. If this was a decent porno movie, or as we said, a trauma film, we would have seen the three snakes, and they would have been nasty.
And this could have been this was made during like a golden period of trauma. Like, I assume Trauma's still making movies. I haven't kept up with them since high school, but I'm sure they're still cranking shit out.
Merited XSW is involved in some kind of trauma screening coming.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Not at all.
But, like, it's so disappointing. I'm just like, man, I've been sitting through this whole stupid fucking movie. Show me the puppet snake dicks. Come on. Give me something here. Give me more than just shut your hole. That's all. I got I got a couple of scenes with Bull. I got the chainsaw scene. Give me one more thing, because if you take all of the parts of this movie that are actually fun and, like, actually campy, it's like 8 minutes of a 90-minute movie. That was I think that was why. If I sound bitter to listeners, it's because I was expecting to have a lot more fun watching this from what I had heard.
The fucking double cross, like the big twist in the movie where it's that guy from the beginning who you didn't care about to begin with.
And I still don't care
and
about
then he double crossed them so that he could get uranium in order to make another nuke. I guess that was he was the one who wanted to restart the Cold War.
Yeah.
Right.
Because he was bringing uranium to renegade scientists.
Right.
So so I guess if it was renegade scientists, then they want to restart the Cold War. All right, so that's another world building thing. We know 5 things about the world: medtech.
I know 5 things too many about this world.
Then the reunion with Spangle at the end is really bizarre.
She's like, "I love you now."
But there's like 4 different changes of attitude within 30 seconds there. It's like being relieved that he's okay, and then being angry with him, and then finally being like enamored with him or something really, really quickly.
And wasn't the guy at the beginning who then came back, wasn't he also out for revenge because it is insinuated. Actually, no, it's not insinuated. It's actually stated. They used the word sexual assault at the beginning, that he sexually assaulted his daughter. And then, so I was like he says that, and I was like, oh, so this is the protagonist of this movie. This is the good guy. This is the guy we should be rooting for, who's coming to the guy who came to murder Piper for that. He's the good guy.
Right.
He's the one who's like, yes, that's a good reason to murder somebody.
It turns out he's trying to bring back the nukes.
Which is not a good reason to murder someone.
No.
They say some shit about his daughter, like, changing her story or something.
It's
I couldn't quite...
It was offensive, so I blocked it out.
Yeah. I didn't want to think too much about it.
It was all very unnecessary, I think. Like...
Yeah, I'm just gonna reiterate, man. I'm sorry, guys. I thought that this was going to be a lot more fun. Everything we
could have watched They Live.
Well, because here the big question that people have, of course, is why didn't you watch They Live? And I want to watch They Live. We will watch They Live in the future because it's a classic movie. I've still never seen it. Many people have told me that I would really love it. But this podcast isn't about me watching things that I like. And that was really my decision. And everything I had heard about this movie was that it was like really bad and fun, and that it was like one of those movies that was so terrible. And there were parts of it that were, but it was both so not fun, and then also just like really, we've come a long way, guys, as a society since 1988.
We really have, and this movie shows it.
Yeah.
No, so sometimes I hear the pessimistic approach that nothing has changed, and like if you really think nothing has changed, examine the culture 30 or 40 years ago. You'll see a lot has changed. There's still a lot to do, but one of the biggest things that has changed is that we've identified a lot more stuff that we have to do, and that's a positive. This movie is not.
Yeah, no. But one positive that did come out of the movie, I suppose, in relation to They Live, is John Carpenter saw it and thought that Roddy Piper would be a great leading man for his film. He saw Piper as a kind of, rough-edged action star who, and his unpolishedness, his lack of polish is what Carpenter liked. Also, Carpenter apparently saw a deleted scene in which, or a behind the scenes kind of thing, where the director was telling Piper what to do and giving him feedback on his role or whatever, and Piper changed what he was doing, and Carpenter saw that he was directable. So thought that he wanted to work with him because of that.
Well, for what it's worth, I thought Piper did a good job in the movie. I mean, he was Sam Hell. He got across.
He did what he was supposed to do. It's just what he was supposed to do wasn't very good.
Exactly. It's like this movie wasn't bad because he was bad. This movie was bad because it was ill-conceived in the first place. It should have been, like you said, there's like 8 minutes of relevant stuff in it. It should have been a porno. You could have filled another hour and a half with banging, and then like 8 minutes of,
Chainsaws.
And we're at Frogtown, chainsaw to the dick, explosion, and then more banging. And then the last scene would have been him like banging the all of the passives, I guess. Instead of it just him looking over and being like, oh, right, haha.
A soldier's work is never done.
Soldier's work is never
all
done.
the indistinguishable passive women.
Keep all the scenes with Bull, too. That's the thing. And then maybe,
So just to tie this back to wrestling a bit, Piper filmed this movie in early 87, or late 86, early 87, when he was on hiatus from WWF. And this was when it was like, oh, Roddy Piper's going to become a movie star. So he decides to retire from WWF. They have his big retirement match at WrestleMania 3, to the chagrin of Vince McMahon. And he goes off to Hollywood to film They Live. Now, both of these films come out in 88. And, as much as They Live was a hit, Piper, what didn't happen for Piper was he didn't end up being taken seriously as an actor in Hollywood by anybody but John Carpenter. And I just wanted to read something Piper said about this, about being a wrestler who's an actor. He says, "I've often been asked how wrestling helped my acting ability. To be honest, it was probably the worst thing I could have done. When They Live came out, a critic for the New York Post wrote, 'Anybody who thinks wrestlers are actors is wrong.' That, of course, was a direct attack on my acting. But these are the same people who were criticizing my wrestling by writing that it was all acting. When I was on the mat, I was considered an actor. When I was on the big screen, I was called a wrestler. I don't think it was me who was confused. There's a simple explanation for this. Wrestling does not help acting. You could say that acting is an implosion while wrestling is an explosion. Basically, they are opposite."
It's a very interesting way of putting it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and it echoes some stuff that we've said earlier on this podcast.
I've heard wrestlers complain about when they, not necessarily complain, but point out that when they do a movie and there's a camera 2 inches from your face and you have to act the whole scene with just a small part of your face, it's very different than gesticulating to the cheap seats like you're trained to do in wrestling. And I think it's a little better now in the HD era where we get a lot more tight face shots in wrestling and the wrestlers are trained a bit more in that kind of subtle acting. But in general, I do still think Piper's right. They are very different kind of performative skill sets.
Recently, with the no crowd wrestling that's been happening, Edge pointed out that his acting skills have come very much in handy now that he's just talking to a camera instead of talking to a crowd.
And I feel like Piper's acting career, whether it's in good movies or bad movies, he's good. Like, I mean, he's good in this, like in the sense that he does this character, but like you were saying, I think that's because he was good at taking who he is and just being able to project it in a way that works on camera, and he was able to do it on command. And then I'm going to guess that all of his roles were basically, they got a guy who's like, what if we got a guy that was kind of like Roddy Piper? And that's the main character of this movie. Yeah, you know.
And then they got Roddy Piper.
Yeah.
But yeah, by 1989, he was back in the WWF. He came back at WrestleMania 5 because, it didn't work out for him the way that he thought it would in Hollywood.
He did use it to leverage more money from the WWF. He was clearly a bigger star on a different level than he had used to be, than everyone else. So he was one of their first, like, part-timers. You know, he gave Vince his terms. He's like, well, if you want Roddy Piper on your show, then I'm not going to be doing, 6-day-a-week house show loops, and I'm not going to be doing every one of your shows. I have a wife and several kids I'd like to see that I spent, ages 15 through 34, buying a house and building a life. I'm not going to miss all that. And so that's, he was one of the first. I can't think of anybody else before him that was able to do that with Vince McMahon. And so he was the first, I think.
To quote Sam Hell, you ladies must have moons for balls.
Okay.
That's fantastic. That's great.
Okay. This has been Contesting Wrestling Premium.
Don't watch this movie.
Yeah, don't watch this movie. Is this a bit shorter than many of our other premium episodes? Yes. We're sorry about that. I thought this movie would be more fun. So blame Donald G. Beavers or whatever the fuck his name is.
Blame Evan,
Jackson.
and remember you can tweet him at @ScribeBen.
@ScribeBen.
Hey, that's...
You can email me
not where Evan
email me at drben@mercy.edu. All your hate mail goes right there.
Dr. Ben.
You can try.
Well, the wrestlers that did make it big as movie stars over the last several years, like The Rock especially, and John Cena now has been in a lot more movies. People ask, why don't you just wrestle on the time you're not filming movies? Because you're not filming movies all the time. Well, The Rock is by now. And it's because they're training acting. They're taking acting classes and doing acting coach stuff with acting coaches because it's a skill that they know they don't have just because they're a wrestler. And
also,
the more that happens, the more wrestlers are going to become actors.
It's also a liability for the studio because if they get injured wrestling, that can screw up.
That is one of the big reasons why The Rock has only come back a handful of times over the years.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to this. I promise at some point in the future we'll do They Live, and then you'll hear us get to talk about a good movie, and you'll get to hear my genuine reaction to watching what is universally regarded as one of the few anti-capitalist horror films, because horror films are usually a little conservative in their bent.
They are.
We're going to watch a lot more terrible movies, though.
Oh, yes.
Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah. Get ready. Get ready for that.
@ScribeBen.
This has been Contesting Wrestling. We love you. Thank you.